Thank you for joining us for MOCs in Motion with Joe Dorsey and guest host Dave Kravitz. And here's Joe.
Hello, everybody. Hope you are all doing well this fine Tuesday. Thank you for joining us again. I wanted to introduce my host or my co-host here with me, David.
How you guys doing? You know me. I'm David. Part of the streams we've been doing here, Person Figs.
So today, let's kind of review what we did last time. So if you haven't had a chance to watch the videos, we went through last time, talked a lot about the different technic elements. We went through gears, we went through springs, we went through beams, lift arms, all the funny connectors, the pins, when to use what. So we had a lot of stuff going on with that. So today what we wanted to do was take a few moments and kind of show some different techniques that you guys can incorporate into some of the builds that you guys are doing. I think last time was really a lot of download from you and I, just kind of like going through a lot of parts and talking through a lot. So I want to take the opportunity. The stream is open. We got earpieces in. If you got something that you're wanting us to kind of tinker with and take a look at, I think that would be really good for us. That'll give us some more content because honestly, we go through these, we probably have about a half a show's worth of stuff. So it's up to you guys to keep us going for the other half of the show. So put any comments, any thoughts, any ideas, any issues that you may be having with the build, or you want to say like, hey, here's a challenge for you. Like we're not gonna be able to build a 1,000-piece set in this short amount of time, but if you're like, hey, I want to incorporate an elevator, or I want something turning or some type of motion in your mock, let us know. That'll help us out, and they'll give us some things to kind of go off of and talk about. So what are you thinking, David?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea for us to incorporate more of the chat, more of everybody who's watching us to kind of give us a little feedback of what they've liked so far. And then, we'll have another video, of course, I think later on this week.
Yeah.
So this will be a chance to spread it out a little bit more. And if we get a little bit more time, maybe next week we could do one last one where we could maybe build something for them in the chat.
Yeah.
And then show off how we did it and how it could work for them in different ways, different advantages of the build.
Yeah, I think that'll be good. So we got a few different things going on here today. We wanted to highlight a few things that we think that will definitely be useful to you in your build and what you're doing. In particular, we want to go through how to use the lift arms and what the different purposes of those are, and the beams and how to incorporate those together. We want to show off the worm gear and how you can use that in your build, and what are some of the special unique properties to that gear and how you can incorporate that in your build. Bevel gears, and then we're going to just show a really simple like gear up, gear down, how to kind of put that together, and show you like a super simple way that you guys can do a transmission with simple parts, or if you have a few more advanced elements in your collection, you can utilize those as well. So what do you want to start with? What do you think we should start with, Dave? I'll adjust my mic here.
What if we do the lift arm first? Very simple,
Yeah.
Up, down motion.
Yeah, so I think that's a good way to start. So these are I'm going to put a few pieces out here for you guys to kind of take a peek at. So these ones are the lift arms. The only difference between a lift arm and a beam is, beams they're always straight. Yeah, they come in 2 all the way up to 15. And then with the other elements, you've got some abilities to turn. So the things that I really like about the beams is almost all of them incorporate pins and axles. So that gives you the ability to reinforce your build. You can hold things together a lot easier. The only one that I know of that does not, well, there's 2 versions of it. So it's the 3x5, and then there's the 3x3, which I don't know if we have one of those in our bucket over here. Yeah, here we go. We got one of those. So these are the only 2 that don't have axles. All the other ones have at least 1 point of entry, which is very helpful. It also can be a little bit confusing too when you're going through your builds, because you got to figure out, okay, do I need it to lock together, or do I want something to kind of be free moving and have an axle running through it? And the geometries between them are all a little different. Like these 2 elements here, they look very similar, but when you line them up right next to each other, you can see they're a little bit offset from each other.
Ryan, is there a way you could back up the camera a little bit? I feel like you're a bit close.
We have people that are asking about details.
Okay.
Oh, perfect. So let's kind of talk about what you would use these for, why you would want to use a certain element over another element. and what the added advantage are of having those different bins and things like that. So at the end of the day, like most of them come to a 90 degree, or they are some essence a 90 degree turn when you're putting them together. So it's just how you're getting from A to B is a little bit different. So let's kind of put something together real quick, and maybe we can even incorporate one of our other builds into that as we're going through.
Okay, so how do you want to start?
So any recommendations, anything that you guys out there want to see, let us know. But let's see, kind of spitballing here a little bit.
So we have these we could maybe use.
We could use something like that. Do we want to kind of show, maybe we'll incorporate the bevel gears into our build as well?
Yeah, to maybe change it a little bit.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people are probably building with regular Lego parts and Lego elements, and they may want to incorporate in some other things that are going on. So say they had a build and they wanted to get motion through that. In one axis, it's very simple. They can do it all with just very easy parts. So let's say we wanted to add in some motion into our build with the bevel gears. We just want it to be a simple 1-to-1, nothing too crazy going on. I'm just going to put this in the back. So the way that they line up when you wanted to do something like this is just offset by one stud. So this will allow us to put very simple motion through the beam or through the bricks. So we'll just add another bevel gear onto here. Yeah. We're going to make it exaggerated. You probably wouldn't build it like this in your build. But just very simple. You want everything to line up. Oh, I went to the wrong one.
First one in.
Yep, first one in. Oh, and then I did an extra brick. There we go. So I'm going to move these other things out of the way here for right now. So very simple way to incorporate that. Now, the one thing about this way of building it is, yeah, you get your motion through, but you have like literally no strength. So if I hold one end and spin the other, you're going to hear that grinding and crackling. And essentially what's happening is that the teeth are skipping because they're not being held together very, very tightly. So a couple of very simple and easy ways to reinforce that is to kind of overlap that seam. We're just going to use a simple plate here. We're going to hold those together, and now I get a lot more force, strength. Yeah, I can apply a lot more force to what I've got going on, like just the difference in that. So that's one very simple way that you can add motion through. So say you have like a large container, you wanted to have some movement. You could just simply run one axle in and you could keep going on. So it's a little hard for me to see what's going on the other side, but you could extend this out and we could build a whole other set with the same type of parts. So instead of using the half long bevel gear, I can literally use a full bevel gear. And we could add a whole other dealio if we have any more gears over here. We may be out of gears. What? We're out of gears? Oh, they're all in this. They're all in this build we did last week. There we go. So we could take and we could add multiple points of contact with our build and line everything up. So you could do something like this, but I just did something and I want to see if you guys can tell me why this particular way is not going to work. So one thing about gears is you can only have 2 points. If you've got 3 points, 3 gears touching, you're not going to be able to get any motion out of it. So an easy way for me to fix that would be just to put this on the outside of the build. So I could have one long beam running all the way through, and putting this on this side will allow it to all rotate together. Having it in the middle when you're touching two gears next to each other, it doesn't work. And kind of show that off a little bit.
I found an extra one. So
you found an extra one? Perfect. So this is something that I'll see a lot in kind of, I call them cat posters, like teamwork gets makes the dream work type of stuff. And then they'll have a picture of gears meshing together. Like this works just fine. But anytime you see a diagram like this, run away, run far, far away. Because if you're going for teamwork, that will not make the dream work. Because the gears are interengaging with each other. And anytime gears are turning, they're kind of counter-rotating to each other. So when you introduce the third one and it's touching both of the runner gears, it's just locked. You just made this one giant gear. These parts cannot spin independent of each other. They're just going to constantly get knocked together. So something to be aware of whenever you're building and putting some things together.
It's not putting the same gears together.
Yeah, so you can have them with points of contact between each other, and it doesn't matter like what size. Like it doesn't matter if you do this, or you could throw on one of those guys, and it also doesn't matter the direction. Like say even if you have it up here, this will work. Like you can make this, and all of these elements will spin within each other, no problem. But if you're orienting this gear against 2 gears, no go.
Right, because these two are the same gears. Therefore, this is the part that's locking right here.
You know, it's the introduction of the third because they spin counter to each other.
Right, so they're essentially pinching.
Yeah, they're pinching. So you're putting a force there. If you introduce another force in there, it can't overcome that. So just be aware whenever you're doing spacing with your gears that you give yourself a little bit of room to work in there. Don't go overboard. You know, you don't need something that's 5 studs wide. If you're just doing one gear, you only need 1 stud in between there. So, but something to be aware of, especially in your technic when you're gearing up and down, doing running kind of follower gears, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But kind of back to our simple build here, just a very simple idea how to get movement through. You can incorporate longer axles, and as long as your gears aren't touching more than another gear, you'll be fine. So you can get a lot of movement into this. The other thing I want to notice is the orientation. So when kind of like I was talking why you can't have gears touching each other, I'll put a couple of elements on here so you can kind of notice something. So when you're just using one set of gears, your orientation is essentially opposite each other. See how these are both coming up at the same time? If that's not the motion that you would like, essentially, if I put a motor on here, whatever direction the motor input is, this is going to be the opposite direction. So if that's not going to work for you, you're going to have to introduce another gear into your build to get the rotation the same. So in a very simple case like this, like we wouldn't want to have these two and this being our output shaft. We definitely want to have some type of follower in between those to kick it out so we get the same orientation. So it's a really cool idea. Like whenever you, one of the builds that I've done before is like sliding doors, like on Star Trek, you know, the doors that open and close. Right. So that you want the gears kind of directly in line. So you're going to use an even number of gears to get that done, because that way it's going to push at the same time in the same and opposite direction. Right.
So pretty much the interior of the frame is where the gears would sit, and you just roll it back, roll it forward. Some Star Wars sets do that. With the doors, and I've seen a couple others where you can just rotate a door back and forth where it's one single door opening up. Yeah, so you'd have to have 2, 4, 6, whatever that number of gears are, because every other gear is going to be counter rotating to the input. So if I do it like this, then you can kind of tell, like I can turn these the same, but if I opposite them, it's going to kick it out. So something to be aware of when you're putting things together. And then as a teaser, we're going to show you how to build just a really simple little transmission here in a minute. We'll show you how that meshes up. But I'll leave it open if there's any questions or anything while we kind of get set up for the next part here. So then how can we incorporate a lift arm?
Okay, so lift arm onto that. I would say that this, you need, what you're working with, you've got a studded build, but then you need to offset it and you want to go to a beam build. Another thing is, here, let's do it this way. This will be an easier way to kind of display that. So differences between bricks and lift arms. We'll use this one. Got a perfect. No, we need one of these guys.
Yeah.
So we'll put one of those guys and one of these guys together. So the beams and the lift arms, the nice thing about them is that it's all contained together. And since it's one element, it's going to stop it from pulling apart. So it's kind of like water, path of least resistance. Lego too is that way, where when you're introducing the torque, as much as it can, it's going to want to separate apart from the pieces. So let's do another quick little mock-up here. I'm going to use this one and this one. Oh, that was going to work.
You need a wired one.
No, we're going to got to use some plates in here.
Oh,
Remember the rule. So if you're switching from beams to bricks, you need to add 2 plates into it. So a build like this, although it's going to hold for a degree of time. All right, I'm going to put something here that prevents it from rotating. So as I apply a force to that bottom gear, as you can kind of tell, this is going to stop that from doing it. When I apply a torque and it can't go any further, it's going to come flying apart. If I have enough. Give me another dealio. Because the force of those gears pushing against each other are going to pull it apart. Okay? So this has happened to me several times at a build where I didn't really think about the structural integrity of what I was putting together. So same thing on the other side. See how it's going to pop it apart? It's not going to stick. So by switching over to a beam and introducing all the same stuff.
looks like there was a question in, or was that you? Okay.
So doing something just as simple as this and incorporating that into the build, we use the same gearing here. Push that guy in. Push that guy in. By introducing that lift arm or a beam or something where these 2 axles have a force holding them together, I can apply a significant amount of torque and it will not fall apart until I let them move. But you can see the elastic in that. It's really bending that. So just a simple incorporating your parts together that way, holding them together. I mean, technically you could do the same with this, but remember your geometry is going to be a little bit different depending on your incorporation between beams and bricks. So that's the bevel gear. And the reason I keep calling that a bevel gear as opposed to just a regular gear has to do with the way that the gears are put together. So these are straight cut gears like you'd find in an old Model T. You can have that distinct sound in your mind. They're straight cut, so they only can go in this orientation. There's no way to go from this to this. The teeth are never going to line up because of the angles on the teeth. Whereas with the double bevel gears, the single bevel gears, things like this, these guys, you can align them in different orientations of 90 degrees or what it may be. So like before the show, Dave was playing with the linear actuator. All of those are going to have a half bevel gear like this engaged with a double bevel gear.
This here?
Yeah.
Right.
That's no. That's this thing. So the linear actuators, you're always going to see these built with something in this orientation behind it. And the reason for that is because, let's say the majority of the builds are going to have this, are going to have a point of articulation. Oh, we don't want that one. We need the smaller. We need the smaller doodad dilly, like that. And then you'll have this lined up on the inside of there. Need a shorter axle. Boom, boom, boom. Where's all my little 3s and stuff? There we go. Perfect. So with this guy here, you're going to have the double bevel gears because the majority of the builds you have, not only do they want this part to extend, but this is also going to be rotating. And notice I can hold this stationary and I can move this and vice versa. So that's going to be really good. But when I apply a torque to this, then it's going to start to turn the end of it. And that's how it's going to extend it and decrease it. So hard for me to do without all the parts in a build. But you kind of get the idea. This linear actuator essentially has got a worm gear. And as you're spinning it, it's working that worm gear on the inside.
This is what a worm gear is, again, for those of you who are still learning. This basic worm gear. I'm not even in the camera site.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah.
Cool. So
really useful. There's actually, we were trying to find it earlier, but there's actually like a box that really works well with this.
Yeah, there's a cheater part, I call it, because
you can make your own box out of brick. But there's one solid 2x4. It's like 2 brick high, 2.5 brick high. And this goes right into the center of it. and that way you can rotate it, up and down or side to side, and it really helps a lot of basic builds. But I feel like making your own worm gearbox is better because you could build more integrity and strength.
Yeah, and you can get some unique shapes that you wouldn't be able to use. So the cheater part is nice when you're really confined in space, and essentially it's a 2x4x4 brick. So it's a 2x4 brick that's 4 bricks tall, and it allows you to incorporate a 24-tooth straight cut gear and an 8-tooth gear into that with the worm gear, and it just incorporates it all together.
Yeah, it does.
So
really well.
we have a build. Excuse me. We have a build that we kind of put together just to kind of mock one up and how to use it. So I'm going to tease you though. I'm not going to show you that one first. I want to make sure we finish up with the beams. So as I was talking before with the beams and the lift arms, they're a really good way to add some depth and structural integrity to your builds. So something that I use and do pretty regularly is I'm just going to make a quick little frame here. Say I wanted to build a car. So I'm going to put a couple of those guys on there, and then I'm going to skip a stud on the other ones. Boom. And boom. And then I can take this is just a very simple frame, but this has no studs incorporated. There's no way to incorporate regular Lego elements with that. But by just building that up, and I may have got my spacing off a little bit, but you can start to incorporate technic brick into that, and your geometries will line up nice and easy. And now you have a studded surface that you can start to build on. So on a lot of the MOCs and things that I've done, I'll use beams for the substructure, like everything on the inside of the vehicle. And then when I want to start incorporating regular Lego on the top brick and want to get some more curves and to kind of build out the dimensions, I'll do that by incorporating something really simple like that.
Right, and as we said before, they're odds. So as you can see, there's this space here, and you could put like an axle through or another pin. That's because these are all odds, not evens, to help create different ways of building and understand more of your space.
Yeah, so even just something like going back and forth in between the two types is not crazy difficult to do. You can incorporate. So let's just build a simple little frame here. So we've got some lift arms, we've got some beams, and then now I can incorporate my Technic brick into that. And I've already built a structure that's got a lot of rigidity in it. And now I can start building on top of there if I wanted to come back across with some plates and kind of be able to have an easy surface to attach.
And that's what's cool about these plates too, is they have the holes in there, so you can incorporate some other Technic in it while still creating the whole Lego organic style to it with the studs and plates, tiles, whatever you guys want to do. So you can easily just click it on there, so now the studs are connecting. But again, these are going to be off a little bit, so you have to make sure when you snapping stuff together that you got a whole alignment set up. Because then you can have it like this.
Yeah, you got to kind of put it together.
Yeah, and then the hole is great because then you can incorporate stuff like this and then have an area to use the gears and the boxes.
Yeah, and then we were talking about the bevel gears to be able to get angular movement, right? So a thing that like any of the guys have had any of the old Technic sets, before there was the double bevel gear, there was the like straight cut bevel gear mix up where they would put these in a set, and then you would be able to incorporate the two styles within that. So it would be offset by 2 plates, and then you could incorporate your gear into there. And this is how this was like your only option to be able to get movement through like a different build. So you'd have something like this.
Some of the old 80s and 90s.
Yeah, so you would turn this or turn that to get it back and forth. But you can even hear it. It's just like it doesn't have the same feel as those double cut gears. So another way, say you had a building with a sign up on the top of it, and you wanted to get some rotation in that. So you could literally have just your very thin part, depending on how large it was. You could use a simple one like this, or you could reinforce it and put a few of these guys on top of there. And you could have your sign on top that you could rotate around. Mm-hmm. So very simple, easy way to do that.
Would you like to show off the little 2-speed?
Yeah, and want to move over into the transmission, or do we want to show the worm gear in action so we can kind of show them how to work?
Let's show the worm gear because we just teased that. So let's show it off.
So let's show that. So you had just one worm gear all by itself somewhere before, right? We have one floating around
right there.
Oh, perfect. So when we talk about the worm gear, it's that guy right there. It can engage with all different kinds of Lego straight cut gears. So you can do very simple like that. In our example over here, we have it with the giant 40-tooth gear. It also works with the very simple and very tiny 8-tooth gear. So what this element allows you to do is you're taking angular momentum. You're engaging the gear this way. So as you apply torque through the axle, in rotation, clockwise or counterclockwise, it's going to slowly turn the bottom gear. This gear is always like a 1-to-1 ratio. So every one time I turn the input axle, I'm going to get one turn here. So in essence, for this is a 24-tooth gear. If I wanted to give it one full rotation, I'm going to have to turn the worm gear 24 times. So it's not good for something you want to go fast. But at the lack of the fastness or the quickness of the gear, you get a lot of torque and it holds itself up. So Dave is going to show you a very simple, just go ahead
and Dave and Joe, would you say that that's more for like precise handling of a mechanism rather than
so
speed?
you have a lot more fine tooth control, and it's also good whenever you have something that's in tension and you don't want it to come apart. And we'll kind of show a quick example of that with like an elevator type situation. So up here at the top, we have our worm gear engaged with our 40-tooth gear down here. And let me put a little something on the end there so you can kind of visualize what I'm talking about with that gear. So as I turn this, every one rotation turns the worm gear once. But in order for me to get this to go one full rotation, it would be 40 turns on this handle. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's a quarter of a rotation. You're like, okay, well, why is that important? Why do I need to know that? Well, what the worm gear does is if we apply a force, I have picked up some chains here. Let's do this. So we have our little frame that we just built up, right?
So you're going to attach it to there.
Yeah, I'm going to attach it to there. And let's wrap it around a few times just so it's kind of up off of the ground. How are we doing for camera view there? Does that work? Okay, perfect. It stays. Whereas if I had just had two gears together, as soon as I would have applied force on this, it would have started to try to unwind the cable. But the worm gear prevents this 40-tooth gear from turning in my build. And it will only turn whenever I apply the force here. And for each one of these turns, I'm getting an amplification of almost like 40 times in the torque because everything is geared 1 to 40. So yes, it takes a lot of time, but in a build like this, you would not have a difficult time lifting a pound or 2 pounds worth of your build, making sure that you incorporated the lift arms and the beams.
Right, because
together.
With the gear attached to the worm gear, it creates a way for it to hold a lot of weight, given the frame of what it's built with.
Yeah, so we're going to like take it apart. I'm going to pull the axle out and then watch what happens whenever I remove the worm gear. So the worm gear is really great in that aspect. One of our friends is building a pretty large ship from Star Wars, and same thing. He's having trouble with the weight, and it's from the way that the mechanism is put together. But it utilizes those worm gears to hold everything up. So that way the wings, it's got a pair of wings on it essentially that they kind of fold out this way. But the worm gear is what holds them together. But there's got to be 4 or 5 pounds of Lego hanging off the end. So there's a lot of stress on those parts, and they want to do everything they can to pull together. And the problem we're having with that one is actually not with the worm gear, but in the mechanism that connects everything together. So
then, really, you can attach it another way.
And you're going to break that chain a long time before you start to strip those gears out of there, which is a good thing.
And see, the chain is just held on by the one stud. But if this was attached a different way, it would create more of a grip, essentially, for it. So therefore, the worm gear and the gear it's attached to could hold more weight when you're going through it. Plus, if the chain was longer, too, it's more turns because you want to get that chain all the way up or string, however you want to do it for the build. But then, as he said, you just remove this, and then
Yep.
drops.
So I've done a few different builds with like sliding doors. I've done like a little trebuchet with the worm gear, things like that. It works out really well. So just a couple of ways that you can add rigidity to your build. So last week we talked about like knowing your elements, like knowing the pins and which one to use them. Lego is even, Technic is odd, but how do you kind of put those two things together? Like even a simple little frame like that, that's how you can start to figure out the math. So it gets a little more complicated when you're going vertical because they don't line up. Remember that in order to go from bricks to beams, you got to introduce 2 plates in between that. But when you're going lengthwise, it's super simple. Like everything will line up, and you end up with a little half a brick on each end. So it matches up really well.
Right, and then here on the end, that's like a stud length. So.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. So you can put those things together. All right, so let's kind of talk about gearing a little bit, and then we'll show off. How are we doing on time? I haven't looked at a clock.
Halfway through.
Halfway through?
2:35.
Okay, perfect. So I want to talk a little bit about gear ratios and what does that mean. Talk about follow gears versus like pinion and spur gears and what I mean when I'm talking about that, and why that's important when you're kind of going through a build. So there's a few very want to come back a little bit towards the camera. How's that? We'll keep her up there. Perfect. So a few of the most general gearing ratios that you're going to see in the majority of your builds all are based off of just being 3 studs across. So you've got your 24 tooth gear engaged with your 8 tooth gear. So that is like 3 to 1. So this is a very, very common, you're going to see that regularly.
A lot of speed right there.
Or you have a lot of torque, depending on which one's your input, which one's your output. We'll talk about that. So then you go down to your 20 to 16. Then you have your kind of 1 to 1. And there's a few other variations. I put them on the table and I can show you those. But all of these fit together within that same footprint. Now, this isn't going to turn because I have so many different ratios going on. But this is 1 to 1, 1.6 to 1, and 3 to 1, if I remember correctly. So the other ones, if you ever want to get into it, are with the much larger gears. You have the 40 to 8, and so that's like a 5 to 1 ratio. And then you've got your 36 to 12. Don't quote me on the math. I'll throw out a chart for you guys to take a look at.
And what you mean by 1 by 1 is when 2 of the same gears are lined up together.
Not necessarily. So what I'm referring to is the ratio. When I spin one gear, how much is the other gear going to spin? Correct.
How many rotations?
Correct. And that's why, it really makes a difference. So if this is where I'm got my motor, this little tiny gear's got to travel further around this gear here. So this one's not going to be very fast, but
the little one's going to be spinning more.
The little one's going to be spinning more, and it's going to have more torque. So it's going to be able to lift more weight. So it does it slower, but it can go further. It's kind of like on your bicycle when you go uphill. It'd be cool if you could go uphill 50 miles an hour on your bicycle, but usually you got to gear it differently. So your pedaling is amplified more.
Yeah, you got to crank it down like first or second gear.
Yeah,
if you got
exactly.
you've got like a 16 speed bike or whatever,
Exactly.
you got to get down to lower gears.
I took a bike ride with my kids on the weekend, and my guys are 8 and 6, so they have single speed. So I was just kind of change the gears, go up the hill, and I look over at them, and they're really struggling to make it up that hill, right?
Yeah, it's
right,
more work. More work.
Feet are moving the pedals. It's only moving that one.
Yeah,
thing.
they got the same ratio for every pedal. So if they're going uphill, they're pushing. They have to push a lot harder to go one revolution. Whereas this allows me to not have to push as hard and get less further, but I get more force out of it. So if the opposite is also true. So if I'm to apply my motor here, this guy is going to be rolling around, but look how much this little 12 tooth is going to be flying. He's going to be just hauling. So in this application, this is attached to my wheels. My wheels are going to spin really fast, but I am sacrificing my torque to do that, because I'm cutting it in a 2.4, whatever the ratio is on this one. Can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay.
So it just depends on what you're doing, what you got going on. So we talked a little bit about that. I want to talk to you about like gearing up and gearing down. So let's say we have a kind of a simple little build here, and I've got an input, and then I need another one of those guys. Boom. I'm going to put a shim on him. So something like this, really easy. But say this isn't enough. Maybe this is still spinning way too fast for the application that I've got going on. What I can do is I can gear it down even further. So rather than this being my pinion and my spur, I can introduce another set of gears. So what I'm going to do on here is I'm going to gear it even more so. So I'm going to take that guy, and then I need just a placeholder. And let's see if I can feed that through there. So this gear and this gear are not directly connected. I have a follower gear, so this gear follows that gear and comes across. Now, my amplification here is in torque, and again, so here with torque. So in order to figure out my ratio, I would multiply the two of these together. So this one, I would add up all the spur gears over all the pinion gears added together. But in a situation like this, I can amplify the torque that I have. So this now is even less than the 3-to-1. This is probably more like a 4-point-something to 1. So in an application like an off-roader where I've got, I want to go really low gear and I want to amplify the torque, I'm going to use a situation like this.
So you can get over something.
Yes. So I'm going to go slowly, but I'm going to have a lot of force that I can apply. Whereas if I did the opposite way, say I need something to really spin fast like a propeller blade, I would make this my input, add my rotation there. And so now every time I turn this one, this guy over here is almost going to spin like 20-to-1. And it's pretty crazy. Like in just adding in 4 or 5 gears into this, you can get up into the millions to 1, where every million turns, it would take me to rotate the final gear 1 turn. So when you're multiplying it out, it adds into a lot. But this is a very useful technique. And essentially, that's what we have here with our simple transmission that we build together. And we'll show you some more complicated ones. But what we're doing here is we're changing the ratios between the inputs and the outputs based on what gears are meshed together. So this is a simple little build David and I put together to just kind of show you. So let's say this was my input from a motor here. And right now I've got these 2 gears engaged. Very simple. But if I needed to downshift and I wanted the ratio to be higher between those two, I could literally pull this out, and now I'm engaging the 8-tooth and the 24-tooth. And notice the amount of spin that I'm getting now. So this is super simple, just to kind of show you the principles of what we're talking about.
So now that black gear is essentially free.
It's free. It's not engaging. Yeah. Now, can I do this? Like, why can't I just have them both engaged all the time?
Because it's going to lock.
Why will it lock up?
It'll lock because it's almost the same rotation.
Yeah, these are stuck on the same axis, right? So there's no way for them to spin. It just gets locked up because the ratio here is different than the ratio here. There's no slipping. It's not like on a train wheel where we talked about how when wheels go around a corner, the outside wheels got to go further.
Right, because there's more of a turn radius.
Right. So in this case, you can't do that. You have to have one or the other. In your car, they get away with doing something a little bit different, and they always have the gears engaged to each other, but they don't always have them engaged to the shaft. And that's where this element really kind of comes into play. So we're going to shift gears here a little bit. Dad joke of the day.
That was Joe being punny right here on MOCs in Motion.
So shifting gears here, I'm
Little
going to show you.
for his,
this is the super complicated.
That was almost Becca level pun right there.
Oh, I'm going to have to use that one on her. I did hear. Have you heard some good dad jokes during quarantine? I've heard a few really good ones. Can I share one?
As long as they're PG rated.
They are totally PG rated. So this is probably my favorite one that
you can go ahead and tell us to your camera, Joe.
Is do you know the difference between Dubai and Abu Dhabi? Have you heard this one? You haven't heard this one? Oh, this is a good one. So the people in Dubai didn't watch the Flintstones, but the people in Abu Dhabi do. I thought that was a good one. That got me laughing. All right.
And that was Bad Dad Jokes by Joe Dorsey.
I need some intro and outro for the dad joke of the day. That's pretty good. Here, we'll clean up our parts.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to show you how this.
Now back to our regular scheduled program.
I'm going to show you how this beast works by showing you a cutaway in this very, very simple little thing going on here. So do I need to come in closer?
Oh, you're good. I got
That
you.
works? Okay, perfect. I'll leave them right there for a second. So we're incorporating like a switch over gear. So I had to school a few of my friends, letting them know that this piece is not for Star Wars. This piece is a Technic piece.
Yes, it is for Star Wars. What are you talking about? It's a really good jet.
The Star Wars
jet
team
boosters.
at Lego robbed
For
the Technic
aesthetics.
team for aesthetics. That's okay. We're getting used to it. The same thing happened with the T bars for all the pneumatics. Like they had to steal that and use it. So it's how it goes.
If it works, it works.
It works. It works. What this piece is meant for is an extension for this selector here. And these gears, although they look like the same on the outside, they actually are a little bit different. They have these little teeth and grooves
Do you
on
want to
the
move it
inside
over
of
a
them.
little bit?
Am I in or out? Let's see, a little closer this way. So this is the newest version of this gear. It's had a few different evolutions over time.
Such as...
Yeah, so before that
This
one
one.
was this one, and it looked the same from the bottom, but on the top it had a little offset, and then even older than that, same on the bottom, but it had...
You just can't see it, but your wife's supposed to have a baseball.
Oh, okay. My wife just put some... Oh, my, yeah. Thanks, hun. And then this is the oldest generation of this, where it's very similar in the back to the front. This is a newer version of the worm gear. The good thing about the new one is you can use it with all the old parts. However, the old version of this you cannot use with the new version of the gears because of the realignment that they did. And I'm actually glad that they did that because you get a lot less backlash with it. Backlash is like that free play between when the gears engage each other. It happens a lot in your builds when you're using the 8-tooth gears because they are so close together. You're getting a lot of wiggle in between the gears, and they'll strip over each other. So backlash, if you were hearing me talk about that, that's what I'm referring to. It's that amount of room in between the gears, and this one is probably the most likely to crack and break when you're building. So avoid 8-tooth next to 8-tooth as much as possible. You'll less likely to damage your Lego parts when you're doing that. Okay, so back to what we're talking about here. So I'll move these out of the way. So what this allows me to do is I'm going to take this, and it just is on a it's just on a selector here. So it's a little ring with 2 axle joiners at the ends, and it's got some little grooves, and that kind of is how I align the selector. So when it's engaged in one direction, it's going to engage with the gear. When it's in the middle, the gear can spin freely, or vice versa for the other side. So what I have here is a relatively new element. They just made probably, I think it was last year, they put it in like the Corvette, in the Bugatti, some of the newer sets. But it's a clutch style 20-tooth gear. But what I did here, but kind of like we did previously, is I've got 2 gear ratios set up. On the bottom, I've got 12 to 20. And on the top, I have 16 to 16. So this is a 1-to-1. So in our other example, I wasn't able to spin the axle, but check this out. I can actually spin and everything's good because nothing is engaged. Now, when the selector goes into the down position, I'm now going to engage this bottom. And these gears are spinning at different ratios to each other, but it doesn't lock itself up. And same thing when I go in the opposite direction. And those are now still put there together. So everything lines up. So incorporating this element into my build, we're able to go from a super simple transmission where we actually have to rotate and push and pull between them, right? So instead of the whole axle moving, now I'm able to incorporate that switch selector here, and I can have everything meshed together at all times. So my red down here is going to act as my input. This is going to act as my output up at the top. And depending on where I have my gears selected, these little changeovers, if you notice, I'm going to go through a full shift so you can kind of see how they work. So only one set of gears is engaged at a time. And on this side, I have it a 1-to-1 versus that. And on this side, it's 1-to-1 versus the other axle. Where the changes are coming from is on the end followers here. And then on the back side here. So with just the addition of these 4 gears on the back, I have 4 different gear ratios that I can run through. So I need some way to kind of visualize for them that there is movement. So let's put just something here on the back so you can kind of see that.
The rotation of it.
Yeah. So as I'm applying a lot of force, this is a really low gear. So I have to spin this a lot to get any rotation out of the top, but my power is being amplified by that. Then I can shift gears, and now it's going to spin a little bit faster, so it's a little closer to each other. That's kind of in between, and that's my lowest gear. So this is my highest ratio, which is 1-to-1.
So do you think for people who are learning about gears, is this like the easiest way for them to learn about it? Like, say they didn't have Lego, you know, but they want to understand of how the ratios work between gears, high, low, etc. Is there like something very basic that they can like?
Well, I mean, it's kind of your basic algebra. It's just your division, right? So you have something divided by something, and it gives you a fraction of some sort,
Right, like 8/12 or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So in that type of way, I think between that and kind of understanding the principles of what's going on. If I have two things the same size, kind of like the circumference of the circle, right? So if I was to take this gear and take all of the teeth off of it and lay it out flat on the table, I think I had one of those elements here that we could kind of show off, maybe not. But essentially, all I've done is taken a long set of chain and I've wrapped it around a circle.
Okay.
And
so then basically, like these two are the same sizes.
They're the same size. So as one turns, it's lined up with another one, and it's actually forcing it to go the same distance.
Right.
Whereas if I do something like this, there's a disparity in the distances of the circumference of the circle to the circle. And that's essentially all we're doing with the gears. So if you had to go and walk up a mountain, you could just look and go straight at the mountain and try to climb up it, but it's going to take a lot of effort. As opposed to if you took a left and then a right and a left and a right, you're making your distance to the top longer, but you're decreasing the amount of effort it's going to take you to get up there. So understanding those two things and a few of those other principles, like only having, one gear engaging with another gear at a time, that helps out as well. And then like we did in that other build with the follower gears, that's the easiest way that you can gear something up or down. So I've had a few times where I wanted a propeller and I wanted that propeller to spin really, really fast. So I took a very simple build, plug one together for you here really quickly.
This one, right?
Yeah, and we'll take something like that and another longer axle. Perfect. Oh, this one may not be the right part to use because of that. But understanding why this does what it does is super vital, because when I apply a force here, not only am I gearing it down here, but I'm gearing it down a second time. And that's what gets me my force. So every time I spin this one, I'm going to have to almost spin it 10 times to get one rotation out of my final gear, or vice versa. If I had to apply a lot of force, I have this one and I can spin it really, really fast, and I'm not going to get as much spin out here, but I'm going to have more force applied to it. And in older Lego, so that's kind of the blessing in disguise for some of us that have been doing it for a long time, we would get a motor like this, which spun super fast, but that had it wasn't able to move anything because it was spinning so fast and it had so little torque. So we would have to gear everything ourselves and kind of learn that. So if I had to say, like, what are some things that would help an individual learn out how to get the motion into there? And we haven't even talked in next week next session, we'll talk about indifferent linkage arms and how you can get elliptical movement and opposed to just a simple spinning.
Yeah, I think the way how we've been doing today's episode is really broaden their idea of how these work, because we've already introduced part levels, and now gears, that's a whole nother concept to it. So incorporating the beams and the plates, then with the gears, that's where you get something like this, where you got that whole framework, and then you got the gears in between it and on the outside to show off how it can work and what does what.
So a little challenge for you guys to kind of take a peek at. I'm going to leave this one up, and so you can kind of get a really quick and easy look at it. I would love to see you incorporate something like this where you're able to change your selection of gear ratios to each other and put that into one of your builds, especially with you guys that are doing the builds with Becca at 330. I'd love to see how you guys could incorporate this type of a technology or an idea into one of the builds that you're doing. So where you have one speed and then you're able to switch it and do it to another speed. So whether that be in like a vehicle or maybe that be in your conveyor belt system.
You can do a drawbridge.
Like that. Yeah, your drawbridge. You could, anything that's going to have some type of rotation where you're like, all right, in one way I need it to go fast, but in the other way, I'm going to need it to apply a lot of force. So that would be something really cool. I'd like to see your kind of your take on that and how to incorporate that into what you guys have got going on. And then we always want your feedback. So anything that you can tell us about what was good or what you would like to see more of or learn more of, that would be really beneficial to myself and to David. So as we were going through, didn't hear anything over the earpiece, but if there's anything that you guys want to see more of, we should probably put this one out there too so they can kind of see.
Oh yeah.
The how to use the worm gear. Oh, we took the worm gear out of it.
Were
you playing while you were off camera?
I was not.
Yes, you were. You were totally playing with Lego.
I was playing with this one, not the black one.
Perfect. So we'll plug that together here, and you can just be kind of see very simply how we did that. I'll move this guy out of the way. So we the main thing with the worm gear is that you're engaging it perpendicular to where your output motion is. So you're coming in here, your output motion's going there, and it can spin around its own axis or could go wherever it needs to go. But as I did it like this just so I had somewhere to hold it. You don't have to have all these other tidbits. But there's your super simple worm. And I'd love to see you guys kind of test this out. Like, how much weight could you lift? You know?
That'd be cool for them to do. It'd be easy using the beams or the 1x6, 1x4s.
Yeah, the Technic bricks. And then how do you what did you learn from it? Where did you find that, hey, I had a little build going here, but I did it this way. And as soon as I applied the force, everything kind of came apart. So I had to go back and incorporate some
this piece or that,
some lift arms and some other stuff into
which would be really cool for them to do. And I mean, that could be something later on, because I mean, we showed off how this works and that for every little spin is a partial rotation on the gear itself, and that if you pull the pin out and release the worm gear, then all the weight that this main gear was holding is going to drop.
Yep. So maybe it's even incorporating this with this, because in this way you could have a drop, right? You could disengage, allow the drawbridge or something like that to go down, and then when you want it to come up, you go back the other direction. Maybe even next week we'll talk about ratchets and how to incorporate that. This is a great element for that, and I'll show you how to incorporate that into something that you want to be able to apply a force to, and then you want it to stay there, but then you want it to be able to release quickly. So like a drawbridge, a piece like this is really good for that. So if you have any of these, make sure you pull those out of your collection, and we'll show you how to use those on our next show. So still haven't decided on a day, probably looking at like a Thursday or a Friday, and we'll get back together and we can go through some more stuff. But that gives you guys some time as well. What's that?
Do you still want to do it Thursday?
Yeah, we can do Thursday. So we'll plan on Thursday. There, we made a decision. Executive. It's done. We're doing it on Thursday. But I would like to get some more input from you guys as well. So whether that be through a message back over to BAM or in the comments below, or if you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, put a comment in there as well, and so we can kind of learn what's going on and see what you guys have going on with your builds. And if you're running into an error or a problem, we'll do a little mock-up.
It'd be really cool is if like they took each one of these little individual builds that they could see here and like kind of mashed them together, where like they put a power box in, plugged it in, and then each one is doing something, lifting, pulling, switching gears.
Yeah.
Like that would be like the overall goal of everything, is to incorporate these little boxes here, all doing a couple different things, but helping one another out.
Kind of like your modules, like that's really the kind of the backbone of like the Great Ball Contraption, those GBCs. It's a bunch of little modules that are all doing another motion. And if you are wanting more ideas, I would say if you want to get a lot of ideas in one spot, just go and watch one of the Great Ball Contraptions. They usually have 50 to 100 modules put together, and you will see a litany of different ways that people have incorporated motion into their builds and putting them together into their mocks. So the whole point of that is to move a ball from A to B. But how they do it is the really cool part. And you can rob and take from those ideas and incorporate them into your builds fearlessly. Like, don't feel bad about using somebody else's idea and improving upon it. That's why they did it. That's why they made the idea and put it out there.
They want you to point out the flaws.
Yeah. Or they want you to take it and make it your own.
Right.
So JK Brickworks is one of my favorites that I really like what he does. So I refer back to his site quite a bit. Surreal is another builder, Sariel, that I really enjoy. And those guys kind of challenge me when I see what they've done, because as a mock builder, I like to build the contraption and then I don't put it in anything. So they kind of force me, like, all right, so you got a really good idea. You improved on it. How do you complete the build? So that's kind of where I'm at.
And that's where you're working on, like you have like a truck frame you're working on right now.
Yeah, so I think I got a part of it. So I started to kind of put together a little truck frame and try to, figure out.
Right.
I want to do a build where I can make something that's super easy to change out gear ratios in and make it faster or slower or more torque or less. And I wanted it super simple for how I put it together. So very simple.
Right.
Simple swing arms. It's got a simple suspension. It's got a differential on the inside. And it's very easy to kind of put together with another element that's the same. And that gives me all this room to kind of start to think about how can I incorporate, a gear mechanism in there that doesn't take up so much space, and make something that can go fast or can go up hills and kind of do the two together. So that's kind of what I've been in the process
Right. So
of
it's
working
really
on
like
putting together.
this, and then you have something like this in the center,
Right.
essentially working all together.
Yeah. And then, then we got to make it shoot a cannon or something. Like, you got to have some type of artillery on top of it, right?
something that's fun and that just works really well with all the individual pieces that have come together as almost like a puzzle, like a picture after a masterpiece.
Yeah, it's what it is. It's I always think of a new set of Lego. Like, yeah, you could build what's on there, or you can just imagine that it didn't come with a picture on the box and take the parts and make it into what you think it ought to be. So,
yeah, that's a lot of fun.
It is.
I've done it.
My mom and dad always made me build the set first. That was the rule. Like, if I got something, I had to build the set at least once and show it to them, and then I could take it apart and use the parts to do what I wanted to do. Because I think they needed that justification for the price for what they invested in it. So I always had to build it the first time.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it worth?
And it always was. And sometimes I ended up leaving it like it was, and I liked it better how they came up with it. But then as time would go on, I'd start robbing parts from it to finish up something.
Yeah, and we on the stream have talked about getting like a set, maybe like a $10 set, $15 set, probably like a Creator 3-in-1, and re-bricking it. What can we do from this set itself? And the 3-in-1, it's already given you 3 ideas. So if this set can make 3 sets alone, how many more can you get? It's like,
yeah, we should do that. We should do a little competition among each other.
And we were talking about that too, right?
We'll draw,
right, Ryan,
we'll draw ideas from a hat, and we all get the same parts and how to
right. It's like, so everybody gets this set. It's like, all right, make this out of this set.
I like it. I think we can do it. Well, very cool. Well, we appreciate you guys taking some time to join us with MOCs in Motion and kind of learning how to incorporate Technic ideas into your MOCs, and how to kind of incorporate. I think a big thing today was how do we go from Technic bricks to beams and lift arms, and then what application are we trying to achieve, and how do we build that into, 1, how do we build it in the smallest form factor possible with 2, the fewest amount of parts. Because parts are expensive. They get to add up. So if you can do it smarter with using less pieces, that's always a better way to build. Cool. Anything else you want to add on there?
No, I think we hit a lot today.
A lot of topics. Yeah, a lot of things. And hopefully you can pause the video once it goes out, and you can kind of take a look at things, and you can incorporate them into your builds. Or if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them to us. And then if there's anything in particular that you would like to see us work on for Thursday's class, let us know later today or tomorrow, and we'll put together a little mock, and that way we can kind of show you how to incorporate that into what you've got going on. So I help you out.
Yeah, and then as things progress, we might be able to get another one in next week. We'll see how that pans out with the competition.
Yep, absolutely. Well, appreciate you guys. Thank you for your time. Hopefully you walk away learning something you didn't know before, or kind of refresher on how things work together in the Lego Technic side of things. I'm Joe, and this is David. And we do appreciate you joining us. We will see you on Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your day and keep on building.
Stay tuned for the stream, guys.